And the next thing is our work authorization for Arcadis. Rob, you made some changes to this contract for us, or for the city?
Yes, the work authorization that's in your package went back and talked with Arcadis. We removed the items that addressed evaluation of the financial paybacks and everything that I had already done. Since they have never designed, or really nobody out there has designed a BCR unit of the Clean B, he just went and looked at it from a standpoint of 11% of estimated construction costs would be the cap. As we discussed earlier, this is a hourly type project. We're still in discussions with BCR and Centresis, and we may not even hit that number that they have in the proposal. If, in fact, after the meeting, Aaron, that was the CEO that was here, and let me introduce Kevin Dunlap, who's sitting back in the third row, is the Vice President of Sales. He is who I've been dealing with since the beginning, and Aaron just happened to show up at the last meeting because Kevin was on vacation. But Aaron and I even talked about where I was uncomfortable with a design-build type project. He was even willing to look at cost-plus contracting because they are a general contractor also, to fill in the voids of the items that need to be built. Really, when it comes down to it, we're buying a unit from BCR, we're buying a unit from Centresis. The last part is pouring a slab, putting a cover over it, and doing some electrical work. Their company, he reached out and said their company would be willing to look at a cost-plus contracting to where they would get pricing from local contractors to do the additional work, and then they would just put an adder on top of it. We didn't discuss any percentages or anything like that. I'm just letting the Utility Commission know that that may be something that we look at exploring that could speed up the process of the design and construction of the whole project. So with that, Arcadis's number is there. I think it was 140 something, 148, which is roughly 11% of construction costs. If you had a $15 or $20 million plan expansion, you would be in about the 8.5–9% total design, contract management, everything, bidding process number. With this one only being at roughly just over $1 million, you're better. You're probably in about the 10 to 11% or 12% area for a smaller project. So that's the number they felt was comfortable as a ceiling, and that's what they proposed. They did rework the work authorization to explain exactly what they're going to be doing. It's split, I think, into 3 phases there. The first phase being the complete evaluation, everything through to make sure that operationally it will work. I don't see any problem operationally. There's a couple hurdles, but I think if engineers and scientists can send somebody to the moon, we can process sludge. So.
Okay, and any questions for Rob?
You indicated we've used Arcadis before, correct?
They did the deep injection well project. Yes, they did. They did an excellent job. Probably one of the best I've seen from a construction management standpoint once we get into construction that I've seen in my career.
Thanks.
Bill, do you have an opinion on that? That percentage is determining their upside on their fee?
No, not
for
really.
Engineering services.
No, it sounds correct. It's in the proper ballpark. The thing I think to understand here is this is a time and material schedule. We've got an estimate that's been put out, the $148,000. It's not a cost plus, and it's not a guaranteed sum. But I guess the real question is how comfortable are we with the 148 being a ceiling, and what's the expectation? We're going to be less than that.
My expectation less than that.
Yeah.
And I'm real comfortable with the 148 being the ceiling.
So I think that's the main thing.
Yeah.
Right. But the way I interpret that statement is there is a cap. It will not exceed 148.
Yes.
And, okay. So I would consider that a cost plus with a guaranteed max, is the way I would term that.
Well, it just says this amount will not be exceeded without prior authorization by the client. We could reach a point where we say we've got to spend a lot more time and effort in how we're going to address scum removal or something like that, and they're going to come back and say, well, it's another 20 or whatever it is. It's a T&M contract with the best reasonable estimate of what the cost not to exceed should be. No guarantee.
Would they be willing to consider an approach that's been advocated here, not to exceed?
Well,
I mean, given
whenever
your
you do
representation,
this is a not to exceed without prior authorization.
well,
So where you're focusing into then is a lump sum contract, and in a lump sum contract, then it's a guess, and it could be if it costs them only $50,000 or $60,000, I'm going to pay them $148,000.
No, we're not talking about a lump sum. We're talking about a cost plus with a guaranteed max, which basically gives the owner the benefit of any savings, okay? And it's done in the construction industry all the time, and I suspect it's done in the design industry also.
I have never seen one that way.
Well,
I've seen it, but this contract is not
Right.
set up for that. I mean, if you want to do you can approach it if you with some different nomenclature. You can go at this with a split the savings and guaranteed not to exceed and so forth. Then the 148 would change.
Yeah.
all right, and the reason I would think we would enter into a strict cost plus is if we were forging new ground. In other words, truly the design entity could not understand all of the challenges that may come before them. But is this not fairly straightforward? Have they not done this before? Are they concerned about what they're going to face in this design?
No. What they're looking at is when we get to the scum issue, we don't know if that's going to take them 20 hours to resolve it, 30 hours to resolve it, or 2 hours to resolve it. So with this contract, if it takes 2 hours, then I'm not paying him for it. If it takes 20 hours, then I'm going to pay him for the 20 hours. We will have discussions as we move along to see exactly the magnitude that work will take. The other issue, the only two issues we have really is the scum, and then is the SCADA control, which is allowing when the unit comes on to process, it's going to talk with the centrisis unit so that it's going to be flow rate driven. And then it's also going to talk back to the scum pumps and the waste activated sludge pumps to drive those pumps so that it's flow rate driven. Those are the two major hurdles that we have. Other than that, but they don't know until they dive into our SCADA system and see the ladder logic and what's written and what the programming requirements are going to be to design the operational parameters on that. Another option that we were thinking of was working with BCR, since they have their SCADA system, and letting them take on the risk of doing the design work for that. And then that might remove the whole thing out of the engineering side of it. And Arcadis is willing to work with me to make those decisions as we go along. They looked at it from the standpoint of, if you wanted us to do everything, soup to nuts, right now this is the ceiling that we think is needed for the contract. But we don't expect to meet that level.
My observation is you've got a pretty detailed scope here. Obviously, you're here in front of us with a very, very high level of confidence, and I applaud you for how you've gotten us here at this point. I'm not uncomfortable with the terms of how you want to go forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would make a recommendation that we accept or put our approval on the Arcadis proposal as it's been submitted. And
So you'd make a motion that we recommend as city council that
correct.
they accept the contract that's been submitted. Okay.
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion?
Well, I've got to tell you that what I would think would be appropriate is a slightly different approach. I understand what Rob has said, but They should, I think, and it sounds like they're familiar with, I take it that's your software program you were referencing that.
Yeah, they work in Wonderware. We work in Illusion. So there's two different
I know,
software packages that got to talk to each other.
Right,
Yeah.
but it sounds like they're familiar with it. They worked with it, that they would do an estimate on the hours, and then if you ask for a not to exceed, then they put in what is termed in the industry a contingency. They assess the potential risk. They ask for that. That would be a guaranteed max. These are public funds. I would be more inclined to be in favor of a cost plus with a guaranteed max where they fix it versus getting partway through design and saying there's not enough money, here's why, and they're coming back to us for additional funds. If they're as confident as Rob is in that we're not going to exceed these, I don't see why they'd have a problem with a guaranteed max.
And I think you have that in the 3 steps through this. We're going to know all those answers in the first portion of that first phase of what we're going with. So
It's just public funds. That's what I mean, as an individual, that's your right, but these are, the taxpayers' dollars we're talking about exposing here.
It's also been my experience that, I always offer my customers a choice of a lump sum, a guaranteed not to exceed, a T&M. There were many ways of going about it, and each one of them had a cost depending upon the comfort level the customer took with me as the vendor.
And I can tell you in the 25 years that I've been doing engineering stuff, it's either been a lump sum or a T&M exactly the way we're talking about in the public sector. I've never done the cost plus more than whatever max everything that you're requesting at this point. I just haven't done one. So I'm not to say it can't be done. I'm just saying it's not the norm for what we do in the engineering industry in the public sector.
It's been my experience that if you ask someone to bear the risk, that there's a premium that gets put into the contract for that risk.
I just wanted to ask Rob.
And it comes down to working relationships of whether you trust the engineering company or, there's other companies that I would rather do a lump sum with because I know that I'll get the end product and I won't be nickel and dime to death. But, in this case, I don't have any reservations moving forward with this type of a project. So,
Rob, you've represented that you're pretty comfortable that the amount referenced in the contract will not be exceeded. Is it true that the prior installations that the company has made representations about have gone relatively smoothly from an engineering standpoint, and that there have been no great surprises in terms of their having to find solutions that are costly? Do you know what the experience has been on the other installations?
Everybody that I've talked to that we went and visited and background checks that I've done have been fine. They haven't. Nobody has popped up and said, "Hey, that there was cost overruns or a bunch of different items." And a lot of them, they're very happy with the installation and it saved them considerable amount of money. And don't forget, we're talking about $225,000 a year in savings. So every time we extend further, this is $20,000 a month that it's costing us that we need to.
I'd like to reiterate, as having been on the site with Rob at one of the sites, the gentleman that did that tour was extremely enthusiastic about the equipment and the way it operated in the transition periods. And there was no comment or hesitation or any way that you could confer that that he was skewing things. He was extremely happy. So, and that was only one site. I agree, but I was real impressed with the way the guy talked about the equipment.
Okay. Well, I'd like to then call the question.
Can we do a roll call?
Yes.
Mr. Tonko?
Approve.
Mrs. Burton?
Approve.
Mr. Meckling?
Approve.
Mr. Hill?
Against.
Mr. Jenkins?
Approve.
Mr. Stradley?
Approved.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rob. We have a conflict of our next meeting date, it seems that the city council wants to use their room. So we have a choice, either the 2nd of July or the 23rd of July. I kind of lean towards the 23rd, since the 2nd is the week of the 4th.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, will the agenda for that meeting deal with this whole question of septic tanks, and or is that something that we've simply are waiting for the city to come up with a cohesive long-term approach?
And that was one of the things I was going to raise my hand to talk. I kind of jotted down some notes in the back when we were talking about the septic tanks and the discussion on impact fees. What I would bring back is to you at the next meeting, hopefully the 23rd, because the 2nd is right around the corner, would be, the plant capacity of the plant, what we're currently operating on an annual average daily flow, what the estimated flow from septic tanks will be, and I'll break that into what flows coming from city residents, what's coming from outside in the county areas, and what would be coming from Indian River Shores, the history of impact fees as it relates to city of Vero Beach and when we started collecting and what those fees were and progressing over time to date. And then I may need some help here from either our legal side or outside legal firm, would be the cases where impact fees have been waived. That would be the one that might take some time. Like I said, I've researched some of it, but there was questions on the legality of it, and that would be something that either our legal team, which is overburdened at this point with budget and everything else that's going on, or we may look at other ones that we have under contract that are experts in that field to possibly research that for us. So
I would recommend that we try to keep it in-house and not
okay.
spend money on it at this point in time. I think there may be a time when we'd have to just go out to do that, but of course, Jim, that's always up to you if you think we need to go outside now. But I think we can probably do this take this first step and do everything in-house.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'd also like to see staff's ideas and Jim, your ideas on what a policy going forward would look like.
And can I, when we talk about it next meeting too, we have a septic tank map that's been generated now. We'll go over the septic tanks, and we'll also look at what ideas people have had. There's been some as far as sewering the entire island, scaled back to as a first phase, let's look at the streets, just like Shore Drive was, the streets that are abutting the lagoon, like Chuck, where your backyard backs down to the waterway's edge, and maybe look at only those streets either side of the road. I'll take a look at some elevations because a lot of them drop off to the river. So if we just started with those streets as a priority, what are our options as far as gravity sewer, grinder stations, step systems, which are out there? I've been working with a company out in Washington discussing a design that may work for the Vero Beach area that could, in essence, cut some of these costs in half. So we'll take a look at those, and I would want your input because you're the homeowners, and you're the ones that, depending on which system you go with, some of them rely on leaving a septic tank on your property. Some everything's gone. So that would be a policy decision that
particularly if we can cut the cost to the homeowners half.
Yeah, so those things all need to be discussed as we move forward with it openly, not like you're going to make a decision at this meeting. Just where do you want to go? What avenues do you want us to take to look at? So.
I think what we want to do is we started this, Mr. Thomas came today and he started this discussion, and we'll move it forward to the agenda next month and see where it goes from there.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, as Rob indicated, that we're not reinventing the entire world here. There have been places where these efforts have been tried, Washington State being one of those because of the water issues that are there. So I agree with you. We should not have to spend any funds we can use internal sources. Rob's got some pretty good ideas as to how to work with them. Some of them are unconventional. For example, in Tennessee, they use some smaller pipes for sewer. From my perspective, I'm not an engineer, but I start worrying about long-term maintenance and operation as opposed to the expediency and the cost savings initially for the connections. But those type of concepts, I think, would be good to vent in front of the Utility Commission so everybody can get a pretty good picture of where we're coming from on trying to achieve the goal, which is to take the effluent from septic tanks out of the lagoon where practical.
Good, and the, Sherry, do we need a motion on the 23rd, or are we good
No,
with
sir.
that? Okay, great. In that case, if there's nothing else,
Is there anything to ask the city manager with respect to developments of the FPL? Usually we get some summary.
We had a meeting a couple weeks ago. We have one scheduled for the 12th, which is tomorrow. And the one that we had a couple weeks ago brought together all the parties. That was OUC, FPL, the City of Vero Beach, and FMPA. Tomorrow's meeting will be FMPA, FP&L, and ourselves. I think we're getting over some of the issues with OUC, and there's, I think, answering some of the FMPA questions. So we're sort of trotting through that. But tomorrow, hopefully, will be another productive meeting.
thank you. Okay, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned.